All right, we're live. I'll give folks a minute to come on here. Hello. Hello. Can't tell if anybody's here or not. It says I'm live. Are you on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there you are. Are you on? Okay, there you are. Says I got one person watching. I guess that's you.
Mm-hmm.
There's Wayne Hill. Hello, Wayne. Still just says one person's watching. I don't know whether to believe this thing or not. There's okay, now it's two people. Wonder if anybody else is coming. Where's my phone? Well, there's some more. Okay, there we are. Great day. A whole bunch of people's tuning in. What's going on, y'all? All right, I'm up to 7 people. Ain't technology wonderful? All right, so last night I started reading from the Jack Tales and I misspoke. I said the author was, you figure out my orientation here. Yeah, I'm reading again. Anyway, I said the author was Julia Taylor Ebel. She is actually, hey Tom, there's Ed and Big Dave. Big Dave. I don't know if there's enough room in here for Big Dave. Anyway, she didn't write this book. She just transcribed it, the text, as this was told by Orville Hicks. Obviously, Mr. Hicks looks like one of the Duck Dynasty guys. But anyway, the Jack Tales are a group of tales that's just been passed down from generation to generation or something like that. So last night I read about Jack and the Robbers. Tonight I'll be reading about Jack and the Varmints. And so here's the illustration that is behind this story here. There's a paddle, and these are flies in a puddle. Pudding's in the house, all right. I hope Charlie's shift's not working. They might be getting a bedtime story tonight. Anyway, so here we go. I need some lemon juice and honey for my throat. It says Jack was a young boy, and he lived back in the mountains there with his mom. Now, if I misspeak or mispronounce, I'm reading it verbatim from the book. So if you don't understand some of these southern colloquialisms, something like that, just raise your hand and I'll say, that means whatever it means. Jack was a young boy and he lived up in the mountains there with his mama. They was real poor. And they got up one morning, got to looking, didn't have nothing to eat hardly at home, not nothing at all. There's Bethany Dyer and my little sister Krista. She said, Jack, son, you're going to have to go out and find some work. If you don't, we're going to starve to death. Now, Jack, he didn't like to work too good. Jack didn't want to starve to death neither. I see somebody looking around the corner. He was getting hungry. Now, Jack went down the road looking for work. Well, Jack got down the road a piece, and he found an old board that came off an old covered wagon. Jack picked that board up and got his old pocket knife out, got to whittling on that board. Jack was going down the road, whittling on that board, wasn't even looking where he was going. He didn't have eyes on path, I guess. Somebody says, do we have to pay for this? No, this is free. Public service. Jack wasn't even looking where he was going, but before he knowed it, Jack had hewed out a big old round paddle. And there again is the picture of the paddle. Jack got that old paddle, swinging it this way and that way, going down the road. He come up on a mud hole. And Jack looked around, and there was a bunch of flies flying around that mud hole. Well, in a few minutes, all the flies lit on that mud hole. Now, Jack snuck up on that mud hole with that paddle, and he came down. Kerwham! Right in the middle of that mud hole. He picked up the paddle and looked under it. He'd killed 7 flies. There's Jack Howell. Hey, Jack. We're not reading about you, by the way. This is that other Jack. Now, Jack thought he'd done something big. Jack went down the road till he come to the blacksmith shop. He went in there and got the man to make him a belt. Jack put that belt on, and on the belt it read, Big Man Jack killed 7 with 1 whack. Gosh, Jack was a-feeling big now. He went down the road with that belt on, a-feeling as big as he could feel. It wasn't long, old Jack came by the king's house. Well, the king was sitting on the porch there with his rocking chair all reared back, and he seen Jack and he said, Howdy do, son. Now here's a picture of the king. Not looking too kingly, but nonetheless it says the king. Jack looked up and the king said, Howdy do, Daddy. Old king said, Can I help you? Jack says, Yeah, I'm looking for work. Well, I need a man. I need a man bad. But I don't believe you're bigger enough for what I need you for. Come on up here and we'll sit down and talk to me a while anyway. Well, Jack went up on the porch and he sat down in the old chair beside the king, and they got to talking. Directly, old Jack leaned back in his chair and the king seen his belt, and he read it. Big Man Jack killed 7 at a whack. Gosh, Jack, does that belt mean what it says it does? Ha! Jack said, It sure does, King. The king said, Well, you're just the man I've been looking for. Jack said, What do you mean? He said, Across the mountain here, a big old wild boar's got loose. It weighs nearly 2,000 pounds. It's got tusks hanging out this way and that way, and people is scared to death of it. It's a tearing down fences and barns. People want me to stop it, me being the king. He said, You go back there and get it for me. I'll give you $1,000. Jack said, $1,000, I could give it a try. If I had that kind of money, I wouldn't have to go out and work. I'd go back home. Jack says, All right, King, he said, I'll give it a try. So old King went out, saddled up his horse, and put Jack on behind him. He rode Jack way across the mountain there to the place he last seen that wild boar, and the king was so scared of it, what the people said, that he got scared and he knocked Jack off in the horse, and the king took off. Going back down to town he went just to getting it. Jack got up and watched the old king ride off and said, Well, if the king's that scared of that wild boar, I guess I'd better not mess with it. $1,000 won't do a dead man no good, and Jack started home. Well, Jack got down in the laurel bushes and the thickets, and he got lost. He got to beating and thrashing around, making a lot of racket. The old wild boar heard him a-coming, making all that racket. Well, Jack looked up, and here come that wild boar down the side of the mountain, them tusks hanging out this way and hanging out that way, knocking trees down and rocks over. Jack seen that thing a-coming, and boy, he took off a-running. Here he went, down through the woods, and here come that old wild boar right behind him. Whippity-cut, whippity-cut, whippity-cut. Here it come, and Jack was running as hard as he could run. That old wild boar right behind him, and Jack said, I got to do something. If I don't, that thing's going to catch me and kill me in a minute. And here's an illustration of the wild boar. Let's see, there it is. I got to come up with something better than that, yeah. Wild boar. Run, that's right. $1,000. to fight a wild boar. Well, Jack was running, and he came down to the edge of the woods and looked out there in that little old clearing, and there was a little log cabin out there. Jack looked. The top of that cabin had fell in, but the rest of it was still standing. Well, Jack run as hard as he could run. Got to the door of the log cabin, but the old boar caught him by the coat tail and jerked a big chunk out of it. Oh, Jack shot into the log cabin, and that wild boar came in right behind him. They was a running around in that cabin about to tear it down, and Jack finally clomb up on the top of it and jumped out. Climbed, climbed. Got it? Let's see. Jack finally clomb up to the top of it and jumped out. He run around there and pushed the door shut right quick and put a rock up against it. And there was that wild boar in that cabin. It couldn't get out. Jack went on back down to the king's house. And the king was sitting there on the porch, and Jack walked up on the porch, and the king said, "Hey, Jack, did you see that wild boar?" "Well, no, king. I ain't seen no wild boar." "Now, Jack, the last 10 men I sent up there, that wild boar nearly killed them. And you didn't even see it." Jack said, "No, only thing I seen was this little old pig up on the mountain, a pretty little pig, and I made a pet of it. But I was going to take it home and give it to Mama, but looky here, it bit my coattail and made me mad. So I picked it up by the tail and by the ear and threw it in that log cabin up there. But you go on up there and see if that's the one you might want." Well, the king rode back up there and looked down the holler into that log cabin and seen that big old wild boar in there. He said, "My goodness, what a man Jack is, to pick up something like that by the tail and by the ear." The king went back to town, got 60 of his mans with Winchester rifles, and they came back. Gosh, that old wild boar was making such a racket, nearly tearing the cabin down, they was scared to get close to it. And Jack finally got closer enough to the cabin, poked a gun through the hole, shot the wild boar between the eyes, and killed it deader than a hammer. It was so big, it took 24 wagon loads of meat to haul it back to the king's house. They got back to the king's house. The king gave Jack his $1,000. Jack just stuck it down in his pocket. $1,000. He was rich. Jack started down the road a whistling, going home. He hadn't got no more nary down the road a little piece, and the king hollered, "Hey, Jack, wait a minute." Jack stopped. Jack said, "What is it, king?" "Son, I got word there's a big old unicorn's got loose. It's got one horn in the middle of its head. It's a tearing down fences and barns, and people is scared to death of it. I gotta have it stopped, me being the king and all. Go back out there and catch it for me and bring it back here, and I'll give you another $1,000. Jack said, "Well, but Dad, I do believe I could give it a try." The old king saddled up his horse, put Jack on it behind him, brought him way across the mountain to where they'd seen that last unicorn at the last time. The king knocked Jack off of the horse, and boy, he took off. Back to town he went, just to get it. Jack got up and watched the king ride off, and Jack said, "I'm going home. I got $1,000 right here in my pocket. I don't need no more money." Well, Jack started across the mountain towards home. Jack was walking up the mountain. He didn't know the unicorn was coming up on the other side of the mountain. Right smack dab on top of that mountain, Jack and that unicorn ran into each other. Jack looked up, and there stood that unicorn, that horn stuck out. He was a-pawing the ground and snorting. Boy, Jack took off a running hard as he'd run. Down through the woods he went, and here come that unicorn right behind him. Whippity-cut, whippity-cut, whippity-cut. Here it comes. Jack was running, dodging this way and that way, running behind the trees, ducking this way and every which way he went. That unicorn caught up to him, stuck his horn about that far to Jack's back. Jack said, "I got to do something. If I don't, this thing's going to kill me." Jack run and run till he come to a big old tree, and Jack grabbed that tree and he swung around it, and that unicorn was going so fast it couldn't stop. It hit the tree and drove its horn plumb through that tree. Well, Jack didn't hear it running no more, and he looked back, and there was that unicorn hung in the tree. Its horn stuck plumb through the tree. Jack walked up to it a little bit. All right, here's a picture of the unicorn stuck in the tree. Let's see. That's the fence. Man, everything's backwards on here. All right, here we go. Yeah. Ain't technology wonderful? All right. Jack walked up to it, slapped it a little bit, seen he couldn't get loose, and he went back to the king's house. King was sitting on the porch. Maybe I can do this. King was sitting on the porch, all reared up in that rocking chair, leaning back. Jack, did you see that unicorn? Jack said, no. King said, well, what'd you see? Jack said, I seen a little calf up on the mountain, a funny looking calf. Didn't have but one horn in the middle of its head, and I made a pet out of it. I was going to take it home and give it to Mama. But looky, it stuck its horn in my back right here, made me mad. So I picked it up by the tail in the ear and threw it to the tree up there. He said, you go up there and see if that's what you might want. Well, the king got his mans. They rode up the mountain, looked down the holler, and there was that unicorn hung in the tree and couldn't get loose. They was scared of it. But Jack walked down the holler and pet the unicorn a little bit. They seen it couldn't get loose and it couldn't hurt Jack. They rode down in there and got some rope around it and cut the tree down and get loose. They took the unicorn back to the king's house. The old king turned it loose out in the field where it wouldn't get no more, where it couldn't get out no more and couldn't bother nobody. The king gave Jack another $1,000. Ha! Jack had $2,000 in his pocket. He was a rich man. He went down the road, his hands in his pockets a whistling. He hadn't got no more nary out of sight, and the king said, hey, Jack, wait a minute. Jack looked back and said, what is it now, king? I just got word that a big old lion's got loose. It's done at 2 people. I've got to have it stopped. You know, me being the king and all. People is scared to death of it. He said, if you'll go back out there and get it for me, I'll give you another $1,000. Jack said, get somebody else to do it. I'm going to go home. The king said, come on, Jack. You killed 7 at a whack. You got that boar, and you caught the uniform. You ain't scared of that lion, are you? Jack said, I reckon not. Well, King saddled up his horse, threw Jack on the back behind him, and rode him way across the mountain where they last seen that big lion. You know, the king had heard so much about that lion that he was scared of it. He knocked Jack off that horse, and the king took off lickety-split. Boy, he was gone. Jack got up and watched the king right off. He said, I ain't going to mess with no lion. I got $2,000 in my pocket. I'm going home. He said, as a matter of fact, I'm going to stay on this itty-bitty road here to take me home, and I ain't getting lost, and I ain't getting in the woods. So Jack started down that little bitty road where he was going home, and he got down the road a piece, and he came around the bend in the road, and right smack dab in the middle of that road sat that old lion, its teeth hanging out. Brrr. They said it roared so loud it shook the trees out of the ground, and the king heard it plumb in town. The king said, gosh, Jack's a goner now. It scared poor Jack so bad that the big lion growling like that, instead of running, Jack clomb up a tree. They say he clomb plumb to the top of it. And there come that lion up the road, a-smelling and a-sniffing. And the lion got under that tree, and them teeth about that long hanging out, looked up in that tree and seen Jack, and it got to gnawing on that tree like an axe. He nearly had it cut down. Jack was up there, and his knees was knocking. He was scared to death. Directly, that old lion got tired and sleepy and dropped off and went to sleep. And Jack said, I'm getting out of here. Jack put his foot down on an old brittle limb, and it broke. And Jack fell out of the top of that tree and fell right on top of the lion's back. That lion jumped up from its sleep, scared to death, and had Jack on its back. Here's an illustration. I'm alive, baby. There we go. Jack riding on the lion's back. Roar, roar went that lion, and it tried to bite him, and it tried to claw him, and that lion run through the bushes trying to get Jack off his back. And Jack was hanging on to that lion for dear life, scared to death, hanging on to its mane. That lion took off a-running. Right into town that lion went. The king was sitting on his porch, reared back in that rocking chair, when he seen Jack coming on the lion's back and said, "What a man Jack is to ride a lion like that." He got his old hog rifle. First shot he missed and shot Jack's hat off. Jack was getting scared to death on that lion's back, and the king shooting his hat off and all. Directly, the old lion came back around the king's house again. The king took better aim and shot the lion right between its eyes. It killed it, deader than a hammer. It fell over in the street. The king walked over there. Jack was getting himself up, dusting himself off. The king got over there, and Jack said, "Look here, king, I'm mad. I'm good and mad." The king said, "Mad? What are you mad about? I shot the lion." Jack said, "That's what I'm mad about." He said, "I went and caught that lion up on the mountain, and I was training for you to be a riding horse. And you come up and shot it and waste my time. That makes me mad." Jack said, "You look big, being the king riding up through here in town on the back of this lion." Well, the king felt awful sorry for Jack and gave him an extra $1,000. And old Jack went on back home with $4,000 in his pocket. The last time I was down there, I seen that old lazy rascal, him and his mama. They was doing real good, and Jack still hadn't done a day's work. All right, well, Melissa said Ed'll do it. I guess he'll fight the lion and the boars and the unicorns. That's the end of the story there. Jack and the Varmints. We'll do this another time. The next story is Big Jack and Little Jack. You can use your imagination and figure out what that's about. And we'll see you next time. Boy, that went about 25 minutes there. Maybe Facebook won't kick me off. Y'all have a good evening. See you.